Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's news update for day 290 of the war in Ukraine. You are listening to The Account. It was a very uneventful day, but we still have a few things to bring to you. So first, let us take a look at the situation inside Ukraine, move on to what happened inside the occupied territories, and after go over some international developments. But as usual, we start with the main flashpoints along the front. Crimea. There is still no confirmation that Dibrova and Kuzmin is under Ukrainian control. However, Russians were reportedly shelling the area around Dibrova, indicating a Ukrainian presence. Bakhmut. Russian sources reported a massive strike on Pervomaisk east of Bakhmut. The settlement is an important Russian rear area for their ground communication lines. Wagner units continue to put pressure on the eastern outskirts of Bakhmut. The spokesman of the Eastern Group of Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported Russia has changed its tactics and is now creating assault units which are divided into groups and subgroups. Avdiivka. Russian forces made small gains toward the settlement of Vodiane. Pisky. Information about the situation in Pisky is divided. Yesterday it was reported that Ukrainian troops pushed east of Pervomaisk and entered the settlement. However, as the dust settles in, it seems the assault ended in partial failure. While it seems Ukrainian units managed to push back Russian forces, they did not manage to take or hold any part of Pisky. Most likely, the situation ended with the front line settling in around the M04 crossroads. This would also corroborate reports of Russian forces attacking north of Pisky. Marinka. Heavy fighting ongoing in the contested settlement. Reports indicate Russia had to pull back slightly from the center due to heavy Ukrainian shelling. Zaporizhia front. During the recording, we received reports of big explosions in Tokmak and Melitopol. No further information was available at that time. And now for the news. First up, the latest developments out of Ukraine. A Russian drone attack on Odesa last night left all but critical infrastructure without electricity. During the afternoon, Kirilo Tymoshenko, deputy head of the President's Office of Ukraine, stated the repairs are ongoing and will take more time than expected. In conjunction with the previous report, the Ukrainian Air Force reported it shot down 10 of the 15 Iranian-made Shahed 131 and 136 drones over Kherson, Mykolaiv and Odesa oblasts. Kherson Oblast was shelled 51 times over the past 24 hours, killing 2 people and injuring 8. As a result of the nighttime shelling, 2,500 consumers were cut off from electricity. Later in the afternoon, the Kherson City Council announced electricity and heating was restored in Kherson City. Moving on to the latest from the occupied territories. Journalists working for Radio Liberty have studied satellite images extensively, trying to identify Russian military facilities. They have counted 10 military airfields and 2 aircraft engineering factories in Crimea. The article is in Ukrainian and quite long, but I recommend giving it a read. A fire at a military base in the village of Sovietske in Crimea was reported last night. The base was said to be home to hundreds of Russian mobilized soldiers, and reports claim many of them are wounded. And finally, the international developments. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Russia could adopt the US preemptive strike concept. While Putin referred to conventional weapons when talking about adopting the US strategy, he specifically noted that it does not rule out the first use of nuclear weapons. Russia's nuclear doctrine currently states the country can only use nuclear weapons if it comes under a nuclear strike or if it is faced with an attack of conventional weapons that would threaten the very existence of the Russian state. The Pentagon has given tacit endorsement of Ukraine's long-range attacks on Russia. It seems Washington is now less concerned about the fact that the Ukrainian military is striking targets on the territory of the Russian Federation and that these strikes could lead to an escalation of the conflict. The only restriction is that Ukraine should not attempt to specifically target civilians inside Russia. The Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Oleksiy Danilov, later stated, "We will be capable of everything, because we will not ask anyone about what concerns our interests and how and where we should hit the enemy." Some are now advising us what we should do to avoid escalating something there. It has escalated for years, years and years, and we cannot betray those people who gave their lives for Ukraine. During yesterday's UN Security Council meeting, the permanent representative of Ukraine said, "Russia is trying to make fakes look like facts." Russia once again accused Ukraine of transferring Western weapons to third countries. And now the intelligence update by the UK Ministry of Defense. Iran has become one of Russia's top military backers since Russia invaded Ukraine. Iran's support to the Russian military is likely to grow in the coming month. Russia is attempting to obtain more weapons, including hundreds of ballistic missiles. In return, Russia is highly likely offering Iran an unprecedented level of military and technical support that is transforming their defense relationship. Russia has highly likely expended a large proportion of its stock of its own SS-26 Iskander short-range ballistic missiles, which carry a 500-kilogram warhead up to 500 kilometers. If Russia succeeds in bringing a large number of Iranian ballistic missiles into service, it will likely use them to continue and expand its campaign of strikes against Ukraine's critical national infrastructure. And finally, the evening report by the General Staff of Ukraine. At night, the enemy attacked the energy infrastructure facilities in the Odesa and Mykolaiv regions with allegedly Iranian attack UAV Shahed 136. 10 out of 15 UAVs were intercepted. The threat of the enemy launching missile strikes on the objects of the energy system and critical infrastructure throughout the territory of Ukraine remains in the future. In the Bakhmut and Avdiivka directions, the enemy continues to make attempts to break through the defense of our troops. In order to counteract numerous cases of desertion in its units of the Russian occupation forces in the territories of Luhansk Oblast, SMS messages are being sent to subscribers of the Lugacom mobile network with a warning about the criminal liability for leaving the places of service and permanent deployment points of military units. The defeat of the concentration area of the occupiers in the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhia region has been confirmed. Thus, up to 150 invaders were injured, 50 of them were taken to the hospital in the city of Melitopol. Information about liquidated ones is being clarified. At the checkpoints around the city of Berdyansk, counter-subversive measures have been strengthened, the number of servicemen of the Russian occupation forces has increased, and checks of civilians have begun to be carried out more thoroughly. People without local registration are not allowed into the city. In the temporarily occupied territory of the Donetsk Oblast, in the city of Horlivka, since December 8 of this year, the occupation administration offers representatives of small and medium-sized businesses to switch to remote work mode due to the increased risk of shelling allegedly from the defense forces. To intimidate local residents, the Russian occupiers fired 4 152mm artillery rounds into the city center. And that wraps up today's report. If you're interested in reading up on certain topics, I included the links in the description. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.